This is the identification symbol, the hallmark, that you'll be seeing regularly in one form or another.
BBC Two.
Heather, thank you for being with us, and this is John Ross Barnard on behalf of BBC Television, wishing you a very good night.
It could only happen to Renee. He's got himself into a bit of a pickle in a lower low in half an hour. But kicking off our afternoon classics now, and the things you have to do to turn a profit in Are You Being Served?
BBC Two. Now, real time. In this week's programme, people from North Devon talk about the influence of television on their lives.
This is BBC Two. Now, Bob Harris introduces this week's edition of the Old Grey Whistle Test.
Now to close this evening on Two, the news from Richard Whitmore.
BBC Two, hello again, good evening to you from David Allen. In just over a minute, the third programme in our series, Man at Work.
Here on Two, our milestone of the film, one of the accepted classics of the cinema, Eisenstein's The Battleship Potemkin.
On BBC Two now, it's time for...
This is BBC Two, the start of a new series now, taking us on a ride through an important decade when you might have been watching us in black and white. The 70s.
Japan's role in the conflict is the subject of The World at War in 45 minutes. First on BBC Two drama, Being Stuck at a Desk Doesn't Stop, Cagney and Lacey.
Here on Two now, The Spirit of the Age looks at the achievements of three of England's most famous architects and the period that produced them. The Cult of Grandeur.
And our drama on Two, Stanley Baker and Helen Mirren in The Changeling. In 60 Minutes on Two, the original feature film of MASH, starring Donald Sutherland. That's after the Old Grey Whistle Test, live from the Rainbow Theatre, London, where we're about to join Radio 1 in stereo for the Kinks' Christmas concert.
And now on BBC Two, Ronald Eyre continues to follow man's search for a meaning to his existence.
In an hour, It's sounds of the 70s featuring those long hairs of California, Crosby and Nash, Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, to name a few. Now on BBC Two in colour and with some strong language, women taking a stand in the 70s.
This is BBC Two, home of afternoon classics. Hello, hello, Cagney and Lacey. And now, Are You Being Served? The only show that rides up with Ware.
Here on BBC Two, the second of our musical comedies with that evergreen dancing duo Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, as tonight they follow the fleet.
This is BBC Two. Now the first of tonight's films in the season, Masters of Terror, a story of Sherlock Holmes and the Spider-Woman.
And now there's romance in the air as we come to the midnight movie, Under the Clock. Made in 1944 and directed by Vincent Minnelli, it stars Judy Garland and Robert Walker.
So, now on to we tidy up the loose ends in the last part of The Long Search with Ronald Eyre.
Now on to The Flight of the Condor continues its exploration of the Andes across the Atacama Desert, which stretches for 2,000 miles along the Pacific.
And now our Christmas Day on BBC Two begins.
The Flight of the Condor continues its exploration of the Andes across the Atacama Desert, which stretches for 2,000 miles along the Pacific.
And now our Christmas Day on BBC Two continues as we begin a season of films featuring well-known literary works set to music. The colourful and decadent Berlin Café Society in the 30s provided the setting for Christopher Isherwood's Goodbye to Berlin. In 1974, Liza Minnelli, Joel Grey and Michael York became the stars of Cabaret.
Boxing Day programmes continue on BBC Two at 11:10 with another in the short season of films starring Walter Matthau, The Secret Life of an American Wife. Now on to Raymond Baxter takes a nostalgic look back at those 40 glorious years when Britons held the world's land speed record almost unchallenged.
And now BBC Two is joined by Radio 1 in stereo as the Old Grey Whistle Test celebrates Christmas.
A very good afternoon, and of course, from BBC Two, a very happy Christmas.
Now on BBC Two we begin Christmas Eve in seasonal style. Alistair Sim and Kathleen Harrison star in the famous film version of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, Scrooge.
Series Computing and Computers.
And that brings us to the end of this transmission for the Open University.
Here on Two now, it's time to dim the lights as we continue our season of Mel Brooks films with Young Frankenstein.
Now, the first of our two Chaplin classics this afternoon co-stars The Tramp with Scraps a Mongrel, A Dog's Life.
Which we begin now by looking at the rise to stardom of one of the cartoon greats, Bugs Bunny. What's up, Chuck?
Music for Christmas on BBC Two.
This is the 80s on BBC Two. Now, from yuppies to mullets, the bits of the decade that were so bad, they were almost good. Strong opinions on it now in our grumpy guide to the 80s.
So now analogue viewers should switch to their digital services to continue watching BBC Two Northern Ireland. If you're viewing on cable or satellite, you don't need to do anything. However, if you're watching on Freeview, you may need to retune your equipment tomorrow, and again when digital switchover completes on the 24th of this month. After 48 and a half years, this is where BBC Two says goodbye to analogue television.
This is BBC Two, and suddenly it's Christmas 1982. Renee and Renato top the charts, E.T. is on at the cinema, and this was on your colour television.
Before that, we try and soothe that savage beast by taking a look at the making of a lute.
While here on 2 Now, we enter the fantasy world of animated film with Jonathan Swift's classic story, which relates the adventures of Gulliver's Travels.
And here on 2 Now, we present Sir Arthur Sullivan's one-act opera, Cox and Box. Now, on 2, keeping law and order in the outer reaches of the universe, it's time for this evening's episode of Star Cops.
And now on BBC Two to one of the great film favourites, as the orchestra slowly strikes up in accord with that familiar running figure, rejoicing in the sound of music.
In an hour, here on 2, Priddy the Hedgehog, a drama from wildlife filmmakers John and Simon King. Before that, a classic tale of love, seduction and betrayal, sparked off by the chance discovery of a bundle of Victorian love letters. Paper Kisses.
And it follows the first part of our movie double bill tonight, with the first showing on British television for Ettore Scola's saga of Roman family life over 3 generations in La Famiglia.
And now, tonight's Western in our short tribute season. Set at the height of the American Civil War, it stars Clint Eastwood, the late Lee Van Cleef and Eli Wallach.
Premiere films for 2 this Christmas.
This is Christmas on BBC Two. Now we take our seats and embark on a film journey through the history of the movie musical. Everyone from Al Jolson to Barbra Streisand say they gotta dance, they gotta sing.
And as we close for the night on BBC Two, we also bid farewell to this particular channel identity. And away it goes forever.
This is BBC Two, and now Newsnight.
Here
Here on 2 now, we prepare to enjoy Stephen Sondheim's Pulitzer Prize-winning musical, inspired by the life of the 19th century painter Seurat. Mandy Patinkin and Bernadette Peters recreate their original Broadway roles and spend Sunday in the park with George.
Rain or shine, you can always depend on the weather as a good conversation opener. Now on BBC Two, we begin a whole evening dedicated to that great British preoccupation.
First, BBC Two commissions a designer interior to provide the setting for tonight's dance house.
This is BBC Two. Now, lock the door.
A chance to see a famous television barrister making his first appearance now on BBC Two in A Play for Today, originally shown in 1975. And who better to introduce him than his creator?
An afternoon of sport begins now on BBC Two, Sunday Grandstand with John Inverdale.
Before that, and also part of the season launching the BBC's Millennium, BBC Two brings back some classic celluloid memories.
A comic news slants on relationships, the start of a brand new series for BBC Two in widescreen.
A rare chance to see a restored version of a classic now on BBC Two as our Laurel and Hardy season continues.
Now on BBC Two with Jeremy Paxman in Manchester and Gavin Esler in London.
Also tomorrow, after 4 weeks of intensive training, Ron Atkinson commentates on a major football match and Esther Ranson interviews live on the biggest chat show in France. Will it be a coup de grace or a public humiliation? The final showdown on Excuse My French at 9. That's it for tonight though. From me, Paul Reed, good night.
BBC Two's rocking around the Christmas tree in half an hour. Steve Wright presents a special Top of the Pops 2 after a mince pie nightmare for Ria.
Crack open the champagne. 40 years ago today, BBC Two launched itself onto the nation's television sets. The first channel to bring you colour, the first channel to bring you Play School and The Office. And you don't get more diverse than that. So settle back and enjoy a host of famous faces, behind-the-scenes stories and a fine celebration of 40 years of broadcasting. Happy birthday, BBC Two.
Semi-final frames at the World Snooker this afternoon. Stephen Hendry versus Rocket Ronnie, and we'll be there at the Crucible in good time for that from 1:30. But now on BBC Two, Money and Business with Working Lunch.
Jason Donovan's shimmied his way to the top of the leaderboard whilst poor old Nancy Delolio's trailing her tail feathers at the bottom. Zoe Ball steps out here on BBC Two now with a brand new series of Strictly Come Dancing, It Takes Two. You gotta love it.
Later, the fascinating tale attached to cables buried under a Cornish beach in Coast at 8. Before that on BBC Two, next time you open a bottle of wine, think of this. Cabot Cove's new sheriff is thrown in at the deep end in Murder, She Wrote at 2:30. But first on BBC Two, more stories to tell from the world of Animal Park.
BBC World News brings us the latest international stories in just half an hour after BBC News, now on BBC Two.
We've been following them for around 20 years, and now on BBC Two, David Attenborough reveals the secrets of an animal superstar with that famous family of meerkats. A deadly mission for Harrison Ford and Robert Shaw in Force 10 from Navarone at 5:30. But first on BBC Two, New Year's Day on the pitch with Final Score.
Well, first there was Swap Shop, then Saturday Superstore, going live and live and kicking. But now, live on BBC Two and CBBC, bring on the slime. It's time for the Saturday Mashup.
Well, hey there. This is BBC Two and we've got a cool, colourful new look. Iconic, just like Britain's longest road, the A1, where a learner driver has been thrown a curveball in half an hour. It's eyes down first though. We have got a book to read. Now that's got your attention, hasn't it? Beautiful new packaging here on BBC Two. Of course, it's what's inside that counts, as you'll see with Chase the Case in 45 minutes. First though, lightening the load. Now, you might have noticed BBC Two is looking pretty amazing this morning. Bet you can't take your eyes off us. And right now, from the power of seduction to the power of deduction.
4:45 and we've Eggheads here on BBC Two. Join Jeremy Vine for that. After David Attenborough's Rise of Animals, Triumph of the Vertebrates. You're watching BBC Two. This is BBC Two.
Now on BBC Two, we are handing over to the BBC News Channel.
Mob threatened politicians. 9 o'clock tonight here on BBC Two, a chaotic day caught on mobile phones and police body cameras as a mob threatened politicians, making headlines around the world. That's 4 hours at the capital, tonight at 9. Right now, Politics Live. Bill Turnbull, clever so-and-so so far, but how far can a so-and-so go? Richard Osman's House of Games tonight at 6. Rob's your man right now.
Highlights of England versus New Zealand in cricket today at the Test in the hour, and now Natural World Adventure, raising a family with the weasels. A case unsolved in our evening film Mr. Holmes at 8 tonight on BBC Two. And now, crime by the water. Who's safe and who can you trust?